Hello, listeners, and welcome to part 2 of our Season 2 Behind the Scenes episode. Again, I'll lead off with a little bit of a disclaimer saying that if you haven't listened to Season 2 and you're here, you're going to want to go back and listen to, well, Season 1 and 2 so that you don't encounter any spoilers, because there will be some. But it's myself, Dave Schwartz, our resident composer, Owen Swerkstrom, one of the trifecta of writers and the final audio editor, and Patrick Marsh, the one of the other trifecta of writers and creator of Hidden Oaks. So thanks for being back here with me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
So we left off just talking through season 2 and finished up with the Halloween bonus episode and kind of going through the stories that were portrayed there. And we're going to get a little bit more into the weeds of the story as we move forward. And the first point that I've got on our list for us to talk about today is the fall of the agency and kind of all the machinations that went into that. Owen, as the creator of the agency, at least in the narrative, not necessarily in concept, but since that's so much like your wheelhouse, do you want to lead us off on that, like the factions forming, who's on what sides, and things like that?
Sure. And yeah, our earlier conceptions of the agency crumbling were much more just as you say, factions forming and the kind of who's going to end up on what side of these rifts and things like that. And there definitely is an element of that going on. But the way it ended up playing out was a lot more subtle. It was, there were seeds planted kind of throughout all layers of the agency, and then there was a master plan at play that such that the hammer dropped at just the right time or just the wrong time, so that somebody like Mira who would not have been going along with this at all was the timing was such that she was out of the picture. There will probably be a story about what wild goose chase they were off on, or maybe not. Maybe we won't get to hear that. But for everything that winds up on the page and read out during an episode, I've got 3 or 4 more pages worth of what was going on underneath and with other people and other actors involved and things like that. It's been a fun web to weave. And then to pick and choose which bits to expose in the story. And I think we all do that. I think we all create more universe than we need just so that we have wells to draw from. And we'll get into this later too, but what you cut out is really important in addition to what you leave in. The agency was a kind of a fun ride. I haven't worked directly with big government type things, but I've worked at large companies and things where bureaucracy and who knows what when and who is saying what about what other branch of the thing. We've all experienced some degree of that, and there's the people who try and distance themselves from the internal politics of a place, and they might get swept along the most forcefully in changes, or what's the word I'm trying to come up with. Yeah, you can tell I'm a writer. I can't come up with words. But when moves happen within any large organization, the pieces are moving against and with each other. There's a lot of fun dynamics to play with. So we got to repurpose some existing characters and introduce some others. And I guess I'm not sure what to dive into there other than...
Okay, I can help on that a little bit. Let's go into it. Let's go into it a little bit less broadly. There's a lot to talk about with this, and just setting the stage. What were you kind of going into in your mind and in the story with kind of bringing Agent Crispin into the mix, and how he fell in with, or how Agent Friedman fell in with him, and where those cracks started to form, who got onto which side, and how that all meshed into it.
Sure. We had in our real early talks before we even had written season 1, we had kind of a concept of this almost Rambo, this one-man army kind of guy coming in, and he got bandolier grenades, and he's let's take on the monster full force kind of thing. And that we never did a character like that, but that idea kind of morphed and turned into the pot stirrer type, the string puller, the person who wielded way more power than they should, just because they could kind of weasel their way into different people's minds and get them thinking, well, it's okay if I bend this rule this way for my own case for these reasons, and get everybody just manipulated in subtle ways to set up something like the big, when the hammer drop happens, that a big orchestrated moment that came through 100 small manipulations rather than a big directional shift.
Yeah, and I think that was helpful in many ways, like making Crispin become a lot more nefarious. He's a lot more dangerous in that way, rather than just some lone, soldier just trucking in and doing his own thing. Like, he's able to do a lot more damage, not only to the situation literally, but also just to the agency in the background. He's kind of like the chief point of a literal, conspiracy, rather than just an Arnold Schwarzenegger soldier coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. He's kind of the opposite, and they don't have a moment together ever, and that was kind of on purpose. But he's kind of a exact counterpoint of Wilker's character, where Wilker can kind of calm the situation down and get people to think through things more clearly, and Crispin knows just the right area of a person's psyche to poke to get them to not think things through, and to act not necessarily irrationally, but to make actions that they maybe wouldn't otherwise, and to get them riled up and ready to do something bigger than should be done.
Right, and I think he found that very easily with Agent Friedman, and I'm wondering how much you set that up in the beginnings of the development of the Friedman character, because he's clearly somebody that kind of struggles with irrelevancy and having been kind of pushed to the background after having been the commander at one point. What were your plans on that, or how did that develop?
Yeah, and I want to be a little bit careful, because I've borrowed some names and I've borrowed some traits of people who have been in leadership positions that I've known over the years. But I do know the guy who, well, it's not like he was a bad engineer or anything. He was just a bad leader. He was not a good, and the kinds of things that got said about Friedman in episode 1, setting him up, and then we get to meet him more, and okay, he's really into the technical aspects, but also you're right. He wishes he could be that leader. He was never quite comfortable in that role, but when he was propped up by the chirping in his ear of "you got this," the manipulations were able to kind of let him fill bigger boots than he really had a right to fill.
Patrick, do you have any thoughts about kind of how the agency developed this season?
I really think it went in a good direction for me. I'm like, full disclosure, the agency arc is really kind of Owen's arc. Owen and Bob. Bob, you kind of float. You're like family, and then you're agency, and you go back and forth. You both kind of go back and forth. And I'm kind of strictly on the monster arc, or in this season it was Alice. But anyways, for me, I liked the collision of philosophies, because you had one part of the agency who was like, we need to keep on doing what we've been doing, and we need to keep containment. Containment is the only priority. We need to learn about what this thing is, but at the same time not interfere. And we need to have reverence for the past and things that have happened in the past. So I guess more Mira's point of view. And then you had the other point of view, which was like what happens when the containment breaks. The idea of confronting this, of trying to kill it, like you have some sort of power over this creature, and having no respect for the past and what you've learned. It was like this collision of ideas. And actually, it kind of reflects kind of what's going on today with the pandemic. Like, we have a certain group of people who have learned from the past and know what needs to happen to be safe. And we have another group of people who are like, we don't need to worry about that. Let's just fight this thing like we would like something, simple. I don't know if that correlation makes complete sense. But it's just kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, and we went into that kind of even specifically if we think back to season 2, episode 1, where Dave, you were a character in that, and the character that's portraying it brings up literally community quarantine and stuff like that, which parallels almost exactly.
Yeah, like it echoes like kind of modern day dilemmas. That's for sure.
Yeah, I remember us being a little bit worried with the cover story and the literal conspiracy kind of stuff, and like are people going to think that we come down on the side of this quarantine is nonsense. It's just a cover story for some nefarious thing,
Right.
We in the end we decide no, we can be playful about things like that, and give our audience enough credit to realize that no, there's a difference between a show and dangerous things.
Yeah, we're all on board with social distancing and mask wearing and believe that those things are real and not a conspiracy. We are writing a horror fiction podcast, and it plays into our narrative, but yeah, that's not what we're trying to portray. Patrick, going back to what you were talking about, I think I would add even a third, I don't know if it's a faction, but just a third perspective. And that is that we get we got a nice view, and I'm glad that Owen brought it into us. But like with Agent Zachary and Agent Ousting, and we can tell that there's more than that. There's, for sure, we've got, Mira and Wilker, and we've got Crispin and Friedman, who are on these kind of leading edges of the two factions. But we've got all these people who are kind of caught up in the mix. They're just doing their job, and they get caught up in the mess, essentially, and they don't necessarily know where they fall internally on one side or the other.
Right. The unresolved, the undecided folks who, as you say, are just doing their work, and like they can see that, okay, clearly there have been failures, like containment isn't happening like it should be, like things are getting out of hand, but they wouldn't necessarily take it upon themselves that, well, okay, then let's subvert our prime directive. Let's change how we're approaching this. They wouldn't do that on their own. But if the order comes down and okay, this is from way up above, and they don't know any different, they're like, okay, well, somebody has made the decision, and I don't know enough to refute it, so I'll go along with it. And definitely, people who are able to see both sides of things that maybe there shouldn't be two sides of, but that's given the drip of information that they've had, that's the decisions that or the lack of decisions that they've made.
I think that leads us really nicely into another thing that I want to talk about under more of a magnifying glass, and that is both Patrick and Owen, you can speak to this, the scene that happens in war. Like, I think it probably deserves a little bit of dissecting from the viewpoint of the agency and the viewpoint of the monster and the Emerald Hawkmoth. Like, everything kind of comes into play in this, and it was just really well done, and really, boy, I remember the emotional reaction that I had to it listening to it for the first time. But I'd like to explore that a little bit from both your perspectives.
Phew, thank you. I'm glad war did its job. Was there a specific moment you wanted to bring up, or just the whole arc of the story? Or?
Yeah, there's several specific moments. I want to talk about how the monster was portrayed in it. I want to go a little bit into the technologies of the agency that we created for that scene and for this season, and the return of the plane, and also like kind of the role of the Emerald Hawkmoth. I think that's another character that really deserves a point, at least somewhere in our discussion today, to be talked about.
Yeah, Patrick should lead off because the way the monster was portrayed in there was very much under his guidance. I wrote the words, but he let me know really specifically what the monster and what the Emerald Hawkmoth should look and feel like. So I'll let Patrick start.
Okay. That sounds good. Yeah. So war is kind of the big climactic story of this of the season, and with the monster portrayal, I gave Owen some guidance, but he really ran with it in the right direction. And obviously, we want the monster to appear somewhat abstract. Like I've been using that word a ton during this behind the scenes stuff. But again, we like the idea that it's mysterious. I think it's realistic that a monster this powerful wouldn't want to show its body completely. It would rely on its own mystique as like a defense mechanism. And how we portrayed it in war was it was basically surrounded by this living storm. And occasionally there'd be flashes of body parts or bones, a bone structure of sorts. But it was literally living inside a maelstrom. And there's a couple elements that we brought into play with the story. One was the plane, which was really exciting because a little bit of backstory to that is Bob wrote a really great short story or like really small story in season 1 about this plane that just vanishes while going over Hidden Oaks. And I had multiple people ask me, what the hell is going on with that plane? Like, what's going to happen with it? And then we were about halfway through season 1 or almost done with it. And we were having a meeting and we were talking about this big confrontation that the monster would have in season 2. And I remember being like, well, what if she just drops the plane on him? And he was just like, I was just like, whoa, yeah. Like, I was like, we've had some loose threads, but for the most part, we tie off our threads at some point with our narratives. And that was just one thread that was kind of hanging out there. We decided to run with that. And also the model of the plane, where does it appear again, Bob?
Oh, it's in...
in the model store.
In the model store, that's right. In the model store. There's an Easter egg that the model plane that's being worked on is the same plane that's disappeared. And that was, I mean, we were like giggling with excitement when we came up with those ideas to kind of to bring it back,
Yeah, we really wanted, because there were so many people that brought up that plane. It even came up in our Q&A for season 1. It's like, here's your plane back, listeners.
Right, yeah. You want the plane? Here it is. Take it.
It was the second big moment that I felt like I got to steal from Patrick in this world of his. In season 1, we had, at some point we're going to have agents converge on and see the monster, not literally the monster, but the crossover into what the surveyor was experiencing and encounter, this kind of instance, the sort of apparition of the monster and be closing in on some form of it, and then just it turned out to be literally crushed like bugs, just decimated. And then this other thing also with the agency, writ large, the whole, basically everybody, all hands situation, and clobbered by, like Patrick pointed out, we've been playing around with this. Yeah, pulls the plane out of time and throws it down on them. I feel both really gleeful and also a little bit bad that I got to steal both of those moments and be the one to write them. That was an honor.
You did it a lot of justice, and the other point that you didn't really mention there was that was very stunning for me was the lightning flashing out and blowing up all of the agents' guns as they pointed them at her. I mean, I wasn't expecting that.
The guns, I would be okay personally contributing 0 to gun culture, because I think I know this is a big deal for people, but we have a problem. We have like a mass shooting a day in this country. There's shit we got to figure out about this, right? And I'd be personally okay if I never wrote the word gun anywhere, but I didn't think it was believable for an agency in the modern era, the 90s, the field agents going out. Yeah, they're going to have weaponry. So yeah, I kind of injected a bit of my own philosophy in there of like, they will not help you. Not here, not against this. Compress time a bit and have a bolt of lightning come in and ignite an entire magazine, and continue to do that for every firearm in the area. Just, if these people are going to be bringing stacks of explosives, fine. I'll give them the destruction that they're aiming for.
Yeah, and I really like the bolt of lightning aspect of it too. I thought you did the story absolute justice, and I think that's been one of the greatest things about collaborating with you guys is we get to those big moments, like these stories, and it's even more satisfying sometimes, besides writing those things, to share those moments with you guys, and you guys take care of them. It's very rewarding.
It is.
And we'll probably touch more on that sentiment with the guest writers and stuff. But yeah, like the Emerald Hawkmoth was kind of the last thing I forgot to mention when I was talking was also in that scene. And obviously the Emerald Hawkmoth appeared in the 1800s arc, so it has a relationship with this monster, but it is kind of a standalone thing that's happening with the Emerald Hawkmoth. Like it appears and is kind of has a conjunction with the monster, but it also is somewhat sentient and somewhat has its own kind of itinerary, if you want to call it that. So in that story, the Emerald Hawkmoth, it's almost like they're teaming up to take care of the agency. It's like a buddy cop show. And yeah, it was just, I couldn't have been happier with how you portrayed it, Owen.
That's great. And definitely all of our fingerprints are all over that story. We've been talking about that confrontation, like you say, since early season 1, we were building up to this. The Emerald Hawkmoth is a good excuse to inject Dave back in, because the musical cue that I used for that, and I didn't use it in War because they didn't know that's what that was, and I didn't want the audience to know for sure that was the Emerald Hawkmoth either. They're seeing sky beyond sky. They're seeing something they don't understand. But usually in the other stories where the Emerald Hawkmoth comes up, that is one of those leftover scraps from the season 2 version of the theme that I got to inject, and that's we got a whole lot of mileage out of it.
That's always good. Now here's my total disclosure. Is one of the things that I like to do is wait. Well, at least I did it for the first season, as I waited until everything was already released so I could hear it as one continuous story or story arc. So I haven't done that yet. So sometimes the cues are very specific because you tell me exactly what kind of a thing it is going to be for. And so that's easy, like the elementals and things like that. And I can imagine how you might want to break them apart in the future, or what you might want to do dramatically with them. So I can anticipate some things, but then there's always these little things that you end up doing that is always a surprise, and that allows me to not listen to everything episodically, but as what, like I said, one big giant thing to hear how the music is working. And so there's Easter eggs for me too, because I don't know what you've done all the time.
Speaking of going back a bit to the agency, in season 1, I kind of had a bit of music that I would use just kind of to signify, the black sedans, when it was agency stuff. Right. I didn't want to go too full on Peter and the Wolf of, every character gets their own melody and stuff like this, but or instrument rather. But I did a bit of that in season 1, and then season 2 I specifically pulled back on the agency theme, if there ever was such a thing. Partly because I don't want to get too Peter and the Wolf with it, but also because of the fractioning, and it isn't one identifiable body anymore. Even if it looks like one internally, it's the cracks are forming, and it's crumbling well before it actually, well before the disaster happens and they're decimated. They already have more or less fallen apart by that point.
I'm trying to think. There was somewhere I believe in season 2 where the sound that was used for the agency in season 1 came back and was used in another facet, but I can't pinpoint what it was.
I think you're right, and I may have just kind of reused it because the mood sounded right, more than the identity wasn't the agency anymore. It was something else, but
whatever it was worked.
Some of those pieces just have such a great sound to them that I wasn't ready to just not use it at all anymore. I don't remember exactly what it was either, but I know what you're talking about.
I think it might have been one of the Shadow Beings things where there was just this huge culmination of different sounds and things going on, and I think it popped in there or something.
I think you're right.
Do you want to?
Yeah, the Shadows got to creep out and steal not only that agency, but the Shadows got a bit more sound and cues. They reached out and stole a few things that were used for other purposes before.
Well, that's kind of what they do, so that makes sense. do we want to take a minute to just kind of breeze through some of the technologies that the agency developed this season? I mean, it was kind of a point that came up in season 1, but we expanded upon that. We can save the ones that they worked with the family on for the next topic, but like some of these other things that they use, like the weapons that Friedman had, and
the idea that they would be working, to help out the family do its thing, but also to act as kind of a backup and a safeguard, and have technologies to either explain away the weird illusions that might leak out, or to help the family deal with whatever the ritual was that the agency was not allowed to learn about. That's part of the whole pact that was set up, years ago. If we get into prequel territory, we might get to explore how that came about. But the idea that they would basically have an R&D branch that is coming up with devices and mechanisms and apparatus to interact in some way with these forces that they're not allowed to fully understand. So it really is old school. It's almost alchemy, right? It's we're throwing things together and seeing what goes bang. They're doing, really specific engineering to see how can we interact with the power and the force that emanates from this insane being that is bound up here. I remember you texting at night about Star Trek Discovery, and oh man, they're doing the Dulles Prism like verbatim, like it's exactly what this illusion redirection field. They're doing this exactly.
Yeah, they did. It was crazy. I think it was 2 weeks after we released the episode where the Dulles Prism came up in the Keep Off the Grass story. That week's episode of Star Trek Discovery, they're in the distant future. And I mean, in the distant future, even for Star Trek, they're like 900 years in the future again. And the Federation has collapsed, and they end up flying into this area where it looks like there's nothing there. It's just some nebula or something. And then they fly in past the deal, and it turns out it's just an illusion, and it's covering up like a star base or something. I was like, they literally describe this as an illusion field. That's exactly the way we describe the Dulles Prism. We must be doing something right.
I'm not caught up on Trek, so I haven't gotten there yet, but that's it feels all right to come up with a similar idea that another much better funded production team decided was worth pursuing and doling out.
Do you have any idea what Friedman's mortar was supposed to do? I mean, it didn't happen, but I'm just curious.
Friedman knows what his mortar was supposed to do. I have a hint of an idea, but just in case we do some side story with some other basically agency spin-off stuff, just in case, I'm gonna leave that mysterious.
Okay, sounds good. Let's switch tracks and go a little bit into the family, the ritual, and the monster here, which is a whole kind of arc that we left out of our first seasons behind the scenes. And maybe start off with, if there's anything else we want to talk about in terms of that first square table scene where Mira and Wilker come and talk with Ellie and Eddie, which again was actually a scene that now I'm thinking about it now. It was a scene that I think in my mind I had always been afraid of because we couldn't act it out.
Right. It should have, maybe should, but our initial concept was a dialogue, but we got way too many. We got the same two voices talking to the same two voices, right, in terms of actors, and that, how do you do that? So we shifted gears, and I decided, well, let's bring this all internal. Let's have what everybody is thinking, which turned it into the most fun and stressful story I've ever written for Hidden Oak so far. So we have 4 individuals who are saying one thing and thinking not necessarily another, not the opposite or anything, but there's a Venn diagram of what they say and what they think, and they keep certain things to themselves, and they say certain things to each other, and then the strangers show up and they're a little more reserved, or however they deal with that. And then just because that wasn't enough to juggle, each of the 4 characters in the scene are kind of two minds about something. Each of them is ambivalent about some specific thing, trying to figure out one way or the other. The brother is trying to figure out whether to stay or go. The Wilker feeling both the imposter syndrome of I'm not ready for this. Why am I being thrust into this situation? I'm still the newbie here, versus, man, this would totally go off the rails if I weren't able to calm people down. Like, what's wrong with these people? I don't understand what's going on here. Everybody's got their own internal couple of sides in addition to what they're saying versus what they keep to themselves. And yeah, I think the moment I came up with the clumsy sized, awkward, four-sided table, I was like, okay, well, that's exactly what I need. It's got to be not quite right and not quite standard, but definitely something with distinct sides to sort of just illustrate where everybody is and help separate all that out. And I have no idea how much of that actually comes across, but that was the internal process for the square table. That was a stretch for me. That was a lot of thinking and rethinking and moving and restructuring for that story.
Well, I feel like we've seen you do a lot more of the dialogue work, the drama work, and it was nice to see you put that together. You did do a good job of making that cohesive and not feeling jarring, switching between those perspectives and things like that. That was something that you got to use that technique a couple times this season.
In Zipper, I got to revisit that and go back and forth between the siblings. Mm-hmm. And they were still, it took place not all that long after the square table, so they were still thinking about some of those events too. So I got to kind of wind down from one story with the other without having to, okay, and now I never get to do that jumping around perspective thing again. No, I basically kept it, but simplified and with dreamy, bizarre elements for their next story.
And I think one of my favorite points about that story and what we had as an idea going into it involves, I remember being a kid and watching the James Bond films and stuff, and my favorite moment every episode or every movie was when you would get to go and visit the Q lab and he would get all of his new gadgets. And that's essentially what we kind of got to explore in that story.
Right. Yeah, here's your exploding pen and your inside out turning metallic battery ball and your all these different gadgets, some of which that was a struggle too. We had, like you say, for a long time we'd imagined this Q moment and all this cool stuff, but as we got to the scene and as I thought it through, the agency isn't allowed to know, like they don't know the ritual that the family goes through. They don't know the details of the elementals. They might be able to deduce certain things based on, at some point the father requested something to do with measuring the direction and speed of wind at multiple points at once. And, this is the device they came up with to help with that. And at this, the siblings don't know what was requested and they can't make sense of how this thing works. And so really what would be the cue moment of rolling out all these badass toys is kind of a succession of letdowns. It's, well, here's something, and oh geez, we know the lamp oil, like right away, that's big. That's, if we'd had that, we maybe wouldn't be parentless right now. There's the big impact ones, and then as it goes down, it's just kind of more and more, well, what do we even do with this? What good is it? Where nobody at the table even knows how useful any given thing might be.
Yeah, it's like James Bond has to figure it out as he goes, right? Like,
yeah, and hopefully it isn't a disappointing scene that way, but the focus was a lot less on here's a bunch of really awesome, amazing gizmos, and more about, well, here's a lot more puzzle pieces. I hope you got room on this little table of yours for things that you don't know how to fit in.
Do we want to talk at all about how the relationship between the brother and sister and kind of who took point on that changed between season 1 and season 2? Like, we really did have a switch. Originally, I remember when we were working on season 1, like I remember developing Eddie a lot more. And then we've talked in the past about how Robin's portrayal really kind of brought Ellie into being a real character that we ended up thinking about more. But coming into season 2, it's really her that has taken charge of the situation a lot more. You guys have any thoughts about that?
The siblings, the family, like I kind of said earlier, that's kind of been your guys' beast, and I've kind of been like the audience watching it kind of grow.
That's why I'm interested in your take on it, actually, because Owen and we're more emotionally involved in it. So like, I think we don't have as good of an opinion as you do.
I think it all tracks good. Like I'm enjoying like where the characters are going. I do think that in season 1, we were leaning towards Eddie being kind of like the stronger one, the more coherent one, the one more focused. But then we did hear Robin's portrayal of her, of Ellie, and we were like, never mind, that doesn't track. we didn't want to just drop another overused strong male stereotype for a character either. Like we were struggling with that in season 1. We didn't know where to go. But for season 2, it does seem like Ellie is grounded in what's happening, regardless of how much crazy shit happens to them. She always has kind of a focus on what needs to be done with the ritual, with the monster, and kind of fulfilling these ceremonial aspects of it that were never actually communicated to her. Like she's a natural knack for it, She's very much, maybe she's got like more of Simon's characteristics, from a generation ahead,
Mm-hmm.
versus Eddie, who starts to straighten out, but he kind of is still a mess and still not necessarily trustworthy for the audience that he's going to be able to do the right thing in any given situation.
Yeah, I like the way that you put it. Go ahead.
I'm glad you said that. That's exactly. I think Ellie has some of her grandfather in her and can see the wonder in these things, and will point out, like, we just drew a bridge over and walked on nothing. Like, take a moment and appreciate the crazy stuff that we've been doing here. We've been communing with water and earth. We've been doing these kind of wondrous things. This can be a gift. It doesn't have to be a curse. And even when they both have their restless, dream-filled nights, a lot of the imagery that she goes through is stuff she's not afraid of or burdensome, but things that are exploring and opening up to interesting things that maybe she doesn't understand, but she isn't necessarily shying away from. Where, Eddie is, to his own dismay, as much as anybody's, more like his father, and like this stuff just kind of kicks his ass, and he's not really adept at dealing with it, both internally and externally. It's not something he has found himself well suited for. They end up, they kind of feed on each other. Ellie might forget how serious this is if it weren't for, they wake up and she sees what a night of dreaming did to her brother, and he's like literally beating himself up while he was asleep. To see the toll that it takes, she realizes the gravity of all this more than she would dealing with it alone. Eddie is able to keep his head above water when he can see somebody being strong about it and not having the shit kicked out of him by this same series of events.
Now I want to switch gears again here, and I've heard from a few people, especially I think even back in season 1, where they were really listening for and excited to see the monster eventually. And I even heard one person say they had damn well better give us that monster eventually. And I hope that any of you listening who feel that way are feeling a little bit that you got somewhat of a gift in terms of that in season 2. We had 2 monster point of view stories, not to mention the monster from the past as well. Let's talk about that and about the voicings of the monster in terms of narrative and in terms of actual voice. I mean, we did the one whole story from her, literally within her thoughts and her point of view, did some audio work with that. And then also the difference that we did to apply a new monster voice to Ishkode, the past monster. Take it away, guys.
But I wrote the story, I wrote the first person narrative of the monster. Was it called She? I can't remember at this point.
Yeah, it was. My pencil for tiny short titles has rubbed off on you guys.
Yeah, it was called She. And that was like a dream come true for me as a writer, because I finally got to write from the monster's point of view in this story and try and walk that tightrope of either showing how she got there and some of her motivations versus what I didn't want to spoil for the audience, if that makes sense. It was like a balancing act of, oh, here's what the monster is doing versus here's what the monster is because we haven't not shared what the monster is yet. So when I wrote it, I had to do that. I had to balance it, and it was really fun. It was really fun to write. I wanted to write her voice as being kind of disjointed but poetic, very elevated, and she definitely has a different set of priorities when it comes to what to be concerned about. She doesn't have the same worries as we as humans do. She has a completely different set of worries. She's a completely different set of motivations. She's not motivated to just get up and go to a job. She's focused on so much more bigger things in her existence, and I tried to capture that. I also got to, of course, make a cat joke that at some point she tried to use the blood that she had wormed through her prison on a cat, but getting a cat to do whatever you want it to do is nearly impossible. And even she, this omnipotent, super powerful monster, can't convince a cat to do what she wants.
Love that.
Which was really fun. It was just one of those stories where I finally kind of got to let loose a little bit and share enough information with the audience to let them know like what her motivations are, but also that there would still be some mystery to it.
It really was poetic, and the way that you wrote it, it felt so right. I don't know what it was necessarily, but man, it just flowed. Like the first time I read it out loud, I was like, this is exactly right. It was very easy for me to portray in the way that I ended up doing it. And it did flow kind of lyrically. Like I have a cadence that I use for her voice. It's kind of sing-songy, and it really fit with how you wrote that. I enjoyed doing that.
It was so in our first half of this talk, Patrick, you mentioned that in school you were taught pick a lane and stay in it of fiction, nonfiction, poetry. Thankfully, you swerved all over the place and gave us something really awesome.
Oh, thank you guys. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it was one of those moments where I got to kind of use everything in my wheelhouse as a writer, and it did feel really right to do it, and it felt like at the right moment in the plot to do it as well, because we had really. I don't know, I'm trying to think of a clever metaphor, but we really had like taken the audience for a ride at that point in the plot. We were all over the place. Crazy shit was happening everywhere. And then here we have this story that's still mysterious, but it's got like pieces of clarity to it that lead up to explaining what's going on in Hidden Oaks a little bit more. So yeah, I think it was just one of those things that worked out.
I can't remember what did you do for the voice for her for the She story, Owen?
Yeah, so last season, and during our behind the scenes of season 1, I had a little separate bit that we injected, or I take Bob's recording of his performance, and then I get a copy of it that's pitched down to 66% or something like that, and add this kind of echo to it and this and that, and layer on snarls of animals, you just kind of by hand, where the waveforms are higher and lower, and matching that up. And then we had this story where it's just her voice the whole time. It would have taken me just hours and hours and hours to do that. So being a programmer and being lazy, I spent a whole lot of time to save myself the time. I also mentioned during the previous behind the scenes that Blender, the program I use to edit our audio, is the wrong tool for the job. Well, it's the right tool for the job in this case, because it's infinitely customizable and lets you program within it solutions to problems you may not realize you have. So I was able to get a big bunch of these animal growls and snarls as their own thing, and have their waveform shape automatically to the decaying echo of the from a different track, and it was this whole big involved thing. I'll maybe have to open a thing on GitHub if anybody's interested, and they can see how all of this works. But it greatly automated the process of not only making her voice work, but when we go back to the 1800s arc, the monster is literally speaking with a different voice. It's flexible enough that I can run different sounds through the same process, and we can get a variation of this effect. So that was a lot of fun. Beyond the monsters sound voice wise, there's of course the monsters theme, which we introduced early in season 1, and it you can pick up a whiff of it in the tail of the opening theme, the bang bang, the kind of metallic chiming sound. Dave helped me out in kind of digging up the ingredients of those sounds so that we can have them big, full versions of them over long stretches of time when, the monster is out and rampaging, and when crazy things are going on. We got our first taste of not just a little sound cue of that, but of big moments of it now.
Yeah, I thought it was literally parts of the theme that were laid in those moments. Isn't it? It's more than just the chimes, right? It's like,
oh yeah, there's Dave walked me through several things that he had sent me over the years, and some new stuff, and was like, here's where those big notes come from. Here's where some of the wind kind of stuff comes in. Basically gave me a little tutorial of how to put together as long as I needed of the monsters theme from his raw ingredients. It was a real treat.
Well, that was one of the things that was really important to understand, that before we, or in the process of submitting musical ideas for the first season, it changed everything I thought when we started talking about the fact that this is going to go on for several seasons. So even from the very first episode, we had that buried in with the idea that this is, it really tips the hat in the very beginning of the very first musical cue, I think, because it that becomes the monster theme. And I think that stuff like that, when it works like that. It gives you a little bit in the beginning, and then you realize retrospectively, oh, that's where it was.
Yeah, perfect how that came out, giving us that little taste. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, right away, episode 1. It just makes it that much more powerful when it comes back bigger as, oh, wow, okay, this thing is out now.
There's a fantastic musical cue or score, really, by Jerry Goldsmith, and it's for a movie that's, I guess a lot of people like it. It is Basic Instinct. The cue that he sets, Jerry Goldsmith sets, is really just 2 chords. And it creates a sound, and it was something akin to what you were talking about earlier, I think, Owen and Bob and Patrick, is that it's malleable because it's not necessarily a pitch. It's more of an atmosphere that ties all of the drama together that can be used. And I really admire that, especially in that movie. It's a really great score. The score is probably better than the movie, in my opinion, but it's one of those things where you can use something in a lot of different psychological moods, and it keeps the movie unified.
You know what's really funny about that reference? Jerry Goldsmith scored the soundtrack for my favorite movie, which is The Edge with Alec Baldwin and Anthony Hopkins, and that it was like 93 or 94 that it came out. I used a reference to that movie in this season. I think in episode 1 of season 2, I referenced that movie. That's funny. But one of the reasons why The Edge is my favorite is because of Jerry Goldsmith's score. His use of French horns in The Edge is just beautiful. It's funny that you bring that up.
Well, he's probably all over a lot of stuff that I do because he's done so many scores, and I know that kind of metallic thing, even though it goes through a lot of different guises. Somehow Outland, which is another Jerry Goldsmith score, is in there. I mean, he did everything. Patton was another incredible score. He's the guy that wrote the theme. He's the one who had to come up with a brand new theme for Star Trek the movie that sounded like it was Star Trek the television show. And lo and behold, he does it. He was an absolute genius of a film composer. And when you start to look at his catalog, oh, wow. I mean, it's just all over. The Planet of the Apes.
Yep.
I mean, that's electric guitar muted and percussion. I mean, he's really a really incredible film composer. But he's a big influence because I just love the way he uses music.
Well, that's good. I'm glad because I feel the same way about him, and just makes me even happier to have you feel that way and be working on the project with us. Perfect. Why don't we move into talking about some of the other new things from this season, which is we've had some new actors and some guest writers. Maybe start off with the actors, one of whom was Dave right away in, was that the first episode?
Was that the first episode?
I think so.
Cover story, yep.
Okay, all right. First episode. Like I said, as I confessed, I haven't listened to them all yet. But
you're going to recognize that one guy.
My final vow for the year 2020.
You did such a good job with that character, Dave. You really brought to life like this. Just even though it was just this small aspect of it, it was like, yep, that is a nefarious like. Weird agency agent talking to the news, trying to quell everybody down. Perfect.
Well, that's fun. I mean, it's kind of fun to just kind of pretend, and I don't have that much experience, but it is fun. I did do some voiceovers, bumper stuff for the local college radio station. Announcing the studio, but I haven't really ever done that before. So it was fun, incredibly fun. And I'm glad it worked.
It sure did. We also had Patrick, Melanie, who is a listener of the show, and then Phil, I think, is people that we brought in that hadn't previously been in the show. Man, there was some really good stuff from those episodes. Melanie was the newscaster that you were talking with, Dave, and then she came back in episode 5 as one of the conspiracy theorists that was on the radio station. And then Patrick, you were the other one. And I think we'll throw a blooper reel from that episode somewhere either in here or at the end of this episode, because there's some really great stuff that came from that. But Patrick, what was that like?
I got to be honest, and I was like a fish out of water with it. Like I just can't do the acting thing. I wanted to give it a shot, but I just didn't like mesh with me. I was relieved when it was over, and then I subconsciously I consciously was like, I am not going to make an effort to do that again in the future.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's not for me. I like the writing thing. I like to try different things, and I've done lots of readings for my books, and reading out loud is not a big deal, but acting and pretending to be someone else, no thanks.
I felt like it fit into that character really well. I thought it came across. It was a fun episode, and we did hear some good feedback about that episode. People enjoyed it a lot, or that story, I should say.
That was written by Chris Gildy, who, of course, was the voice of Agent Mattson in season 1. Yeah, then his voice hasn't appeared in since, and of course, Mattson is gone. But he and I, going back through college, we wrote and shot a whole bunch of just bizarre little short comedy bits together, and it's a safe bet. If Chris is involved, it's going to be a fun thing to act through, and it's going to be kind of ridiculous, and it's going to be fun.
I had a fun time. Go ahead, Bob.
No, go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, I was going to say I had a great time doing it, but I just, it was just one of those things where I felt like I couldn't lend the amount of authenticity to it that I had hoped for. It was harder than I thought, I guess. And
I'm right there with you, Patrick. Acting is hard. I really appreciate people who can do it.
Yeah, I can't quite get there. It's almost like you can tell when people are good at acting because there's no separation between who they are and who they're trying to be. And with me, I could not like bridge that separation. Like I was too just trying to act things out instead of just being the character, if that makes sense. I think that people that can pretend and completely embrace it, like I think there's skill to it, and I get it.
But yeah, I'm glad that you brought up that other point, Owen, about that episode or that story was written by Chris, because that's the second half of this. Is we had Chris Gildy, Colin Arnett, and Shamar Hunter write these three stories, and it was something that Owen and I, talked about in season 1. Like originally, we thought we were just going to be part of the production team and not writing at all, and that we would have all these guest writers. It's something we've talked about since then, but we actually acted on it this time, and I thought the results were fantastic. The first one that we experienced was the gardener, or the gardener. It was just a one-off deal, but it felt like it fit really well into the universe. I was happy with what we got, and then same thing with Shamar's story. He really took some of the world and the kind of community aspect and built it in a nice little puzzle piece that fit very well with what we had already established. Yeah,
A New Home was very much a Hidden Oaks story, and really all the guest stories were. But for me, that was the one that gelled the best and was the most kind of consistent with what had been set up. But of course, the whole point of having guest writers is to have varied voices and to have lots of different kinds of perspectives and styles, which we've at least dipped our toe in now. We didn't get to do it for season 1. We finally got 3 real solid guest stories in for season 2. Yeah, like Bob said, he and I didn't think we figured we'd be guest writers and then we would be able to sit back, but has not worked out that way.
The guest writing experience, I think, has gone really fantastic. It's even harder because we're doing it all electronically. We have to communicate. We can't just sit down at like a library or a coffee shop and go over a story. We're doing it all through email and Skype and text. So it's got that element to it too. But I thought it all went really well. Each story, I thought, definitely expanded the universe in different directions that we wouldn't have thought of. But we each had kind of a story that we shepherded. And I did Shamar's story. And Shamar, this was kind of his first crack at publishing something and putting something out there. So it was really fun to be part of that experience. And it kind of reminds you that what we're doing with the podcast and what we're doing with all this writing and storytelling is that it's kind of a privilege. Like it's kind of a special deal. When you help one of the guest authors get their work out there, it just enhances that feeling, It makes you feel like, wow, this is so cool that we're doing this stuff. In terms of Shamar's story, like he took the earwigs, which were kind of my darling from the first season, and took them in a completely different direction, and it really worked out well. And as we kind of talked about after that story got done, Bob, you mentioned this, that it ends on kind of a happy note. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of like, it was like jarring to have happiness in our story, but it was needed.
Yeah, it was cute. I really liked it. He had a buddy in the earwigs. It fits so well. Like it did. It wrapped up a few things, right? Because I think in another way, it was the earwigs kind of, I don't know, like atoning for what they felt that they did wrong.
Yeah, I'd say that's right. Yeah,
they got to make a child's life better instead of help destroy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they, at the end of the season 1, they did feel culpable for it. So it really did track, and we had kind of set up the guest writers to bake their own content, independent of any narrative strands that that might interfere with our main arc stuff or anything. But none of that happened. It was just kind of, it worked out really well with all the authors.
Chris had not been listening to the show, and when he submitted his story to us, there was a lot of modern stuff in it, like present day modern, not 90s modern. There was, we had to make a few adjustments to put it back in the correct time. But there was a little bit of tripping over. Well, we've got the quarantine going on, and we got the stuff with the agency, but the rest of it actually melded together pretty well. And having agents barge in and manhandle people who calling into this show, I don't think any of us would have thought to do that in an episode like this. So it was really fun to kind of get very much an outsider. Yeah, he's done voice work for us, but he was kind of an outsider's approach to a story that plunks right exactly into the middle of our world and our events and our story arc as they're going through. Pretty happy fit.
Yeah, and thinking back to Colin's story, The Gardener, I'm realizing now that was the third iteration of the expanding magic that I was trying to think of in the last episode. It was, he did do a good job of, that was the first thing he ever wrote also, by the way. But yeah, it allowed for like a kind of a recap of the summer. Like there was that whole backstory with the character when she comes in from college and does her summer job, and then just really allowed that natural horror magic that we kind of wanted to develop. We had talked about making some of the weirdness be more in tune with kind of natural world weirdness again, or we had at least had that idea. Because I think the prompt of like somebody's garden goes crazy was ours, wasn't it? Didn't we farm that bullet
like
point out?
That around, yeah.
And then he ran with it.
That was definitely us.
Yeah, and so we had that idea, and are likely going to be using that again in the future, like more of the actual natural world stuff, not some of the other things. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like that really fit and kind of portrayed that projecting the magic out more distant from Hidden Oaks. All three of those stories were wonderful. I couldn't have been happier with them.
In between these segments that we're recording right now, I started pestering Dave to see, hey, in addition to writing our music, would you like to be a guest writer story-wise for us? I don't think I've quite convinced him here, but
I've thought about asking Dave.
What our inboxes if you want to hear what Dave can write in words as well as music.
Yeah, I've thought about asking Dave too, because he's alluded to the fact that he has written stories before.
This is going to be one of those Andy Kaufman on Saturday Night Live things. Is that how that's going to end?
We want you to verbally tell us a full story right now, and then we'll. Patrick, do you want to give a plug out to anybody that could be listening right now if they want to write something for us? Am I putting you on the spot too much? I can do it.
Oh no, that I can do that. Yeah. And if you're interested in contributing to Hidden Oaks with a story for season 3, just email us at hiddenoakspodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook. There's many ways to communicate with us. We Twitter, like we'll get back to you. We're looking for fiction, obviously, and if you wanted to explore a certain strand or a certain thread of the narrative, let us know what you're thinking, and we'll talk about it and we'll figure something out. But we're always trying to improve the diversity of perspective with our podcast and include everyone from all sorts of different backgrounds and walks of life. So please don't limit yourself and think that your voice doesn't have a place on Hidden Oaks. Please, submit, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Absolutely. I hope we do. That would be so exciting from all of us, I think. And now, speaking about writing, why don't we get into some of the little editing quirks and discussions that we've had from this season The first one that I'm seeing in front of me is the one about where in To the Hunting Ground, Patrick made the Lilliput manager a pirate.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why. I've never driven I've driven by Lilliput many times, and I've never seen like a pirate walking around there before. I was trying to find like in my day-to-day life where that like subconscious anchor for that image was. And my only thought was I got Stars temporarily to watch Outlander on with my wife, and there's a pirate show on Stars, I think called Black Sails.
Oh, really?
And there was like a preview for pirates. And then shortly later, I wrote that story, and I don't know if that was it or not. But anyways, long story short, I made the manager at Lilliput a pirate. He had like a long beard, an eye patch. Was he missing a leg too? I can't remember. Both Bob and Owen, when they were editing it, were like, this seems like a little too far-fetched or a little too much. That this guy was just like this like Lilliput's basically being run by a pirate. And it was just one of those funny things where your description of a character just kind of goes in a really wacky direction.
I mean, it kind of fit. Like, so for those of you that aren't from our area, and those of you that don't know, Lilliput it's like a suburban mini golf place that has go-karts and bumper boats as well. And it's been there forever. Like, it's been there since like when we were kids, at least the 90s, but I think even earlier than that. And, when I'm thinking about it, like, it does seem like the kind of place that would be run by a pirate. It has a little bit of our manager is a pirate vibe to it, to be honest. Like, it didn't really strike me as too weird, but it was a little cartoony, I guess. But Lilliput itself is cartoony. So, I don't know. It's just funny.
Yeah. No, it does track to a point because it's kind of such a weird place that it could be run by a pirate. That's why it's like lasted as long as it has. But it just, for the point of the story, I took it out just because there was so much going on already with that individual story with Lilliput, with the T-Rex coming to life and walking around, which was really fun to write, by the way. To the Hunting Ground was just fun in general to write because I basically jumped from scene to scene, having crazy shit happen to our characters.
Another one of those multi-story stories that we've come to embrace during season 2.
Yes.
And we've had we'll argue back and forth on our internal wiki when we're editing stories. This is going back to the Halloween episode. I think Patrick described a house that they were going going into as like a colonial split level or so. Bob had some valid architectural reason that doesn't make any sense.
I was like, there ain't no colonial.
You're worried about the style and architecture of this haunted house that has appeared out of nowhere.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like, ain't no colonial plantation style home that's a split entry. It's like, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's just like it always harkens back in my mind to Patton Oswalt talking about people at the Star Wars when he was watching a Star Wars movie in the theater and somebody yelled out like, "Fake, you wouldn't hear the Death Star explode in space, it's a vacuum." And somebody's like, "Oh yeah, but the Wookiee representations are so realistic." Like, suspend your disbelief.
Yeah, that was it is one of those things with fiction where it's like, or supernatural fiction or whatever you want to call it. It's just sometimes you have to kind of suspend your disbelief, and it's just kind of part of enjoying that genre.
Yeah, there's a fine line. I mean, it really is still something to consider though, because you, like with fantastic realism, which is very much what we're doing, you do still have to ground it somewhere in the real world. And I'm not trying to back up the colonial split entry thing. I'm just talking conceptually now at this point, because like one thing once in a while that would bother me with Terry Pratchett, I love Terry Pratchett, but sometimes he would just be like, he would set up this extremely complex situation and then work himself into a corner and just be like, boop, magic got me out, done. And it's like, oh man, like that's such a cop out. Like sometimes you can go too far where you're just like, you can't just magic wand yourself out here or something like that. Like there is still something that needs to feel real about it, right? And where that line is, like obviously we fall on both sides of it at different times. It's something that your listeners or your readers or whatever can get tired of if it's used too often, or if it doesn't make sense too often, right? I don't know. I'm rambling.
No, that makes sense. And I think all three of us in our editing and our brainstorming meetings and stuff, we occasionally, some of us, we all have fallen on more realism, less realism, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like per story, like it's not just the Halloween episode this has happened on. We've all been like, well, I don't know if that would really happen. And then we've been like, well, those are Magic Vines who sing songs, from a musical or some damn thing. I don't know.
Right.
Just some crappy example like that. It's just, it triggers differently in each one of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it goes back to like what our backgrounds are in or something. Like, I remember I mentioned the lights on the little, the wind vane things, and Owen had to make sure he double checked to make sure that I mentioned the color blue, and he's like, what year did blue LEDs come out?
That's right. I was convinced it was too early for that, but no, they were around longer than I thought.
Just by a couple years though. It was close. I think it was like 6 years or something. Like,
yeah,
93.
like there was basically a Nobel Prize given more or less for blue LED technology, and that was in the 2000s, but they were on the market well before that. It was the science was rewarded pretty late that let these things happen. But yeah, it's kind of funny the details we pick up on, and it happened with the arcade game too. It was going to be we renamed it to Big Shot Buckshot or something because it was going to be insert actual name of arcade machine here, but we checked and that came out in 2000 or something.
Right, that's right. I forgot. I thought it was a trademark thing, but it was actually because that game didn't exist.
Yeah, I wanted it to be Big Buck Hunter, but we couldn't do that because when I worked at a movie theater, they had in the arcade they had a Big Buck Hunter, and it played the same like country twang theme song over and over again that I mentioned in Joe DiMaggio's, and I just wanted to write about that fucking thing.
I did not have fun editing that because I had to go find some god awful MIDI.
Yeah, right.
It was perfect what you found.
That would be instantly annoying. And I don't like country music to begin with, but I had to find like the worst possible way to listen to it and then figure out how to.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh yeah. What we got into at the next point was discussion that we've had at least once. I think it's even come up a couple times, and there's something that I can add to the end of this now once we get into it. But it was some of my notes that I was given when I had written shadow boxes, and I wrote them down here on our notepad. So basically, like, shadow boxes was the story where I made that character Gary who owns a hobby shop, and Father Witherow comes in. And they're like being really nice to each other. And Patrick was like, they're too nice. I can't even believe it. He's just like this guy. And I'm like, well, I'm sitting here thinking, I've got like this basically almost retired hobby shop owner who's doing what he loves and a priest. Like, what do you want me to make one of them like an asshole? Like, it's like, no,
well,
I think
one of them needs to be a pirate. That's the problem.
Not enough pirates. But his notes were like, I'll quote him here. So Patrick's like, oh, they should have been more, I guess I got to go in and sell trains to dipshits again. This guy's so freaking friendly. I'm having a hard time believing he's real. Isn't there something he doesn't like or look forward to in this world? And then like 2 paragraphs later, he was like, again, these fuckers are so goddamn friendly. I need something negative about their behavior or perspective to reduce the shine. Maybe there's a door that gets stuck shut. Something breaks. Anything to prevent this image of friendly people. It's like, wow, what a bleak view of the world and human beings.
That's right.
Well, and then we got to get grumpy Patrick store clerk at the end of the season.
That's where I was
to get out that version.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go to next. Like when I got the chance to put that together, and that was the very last story written, I really dragged my feet towards the end of the season 2 from the next point that we're going to talk about here. But when I started writing that scene, I was just like, you know what? Let's just go ahead and give Patrick what he's looking for, and I'll let it be through Patrick that it comes out. And it was just this tired, like sick of dealing with the people and the events that he's had to live through. And you guys know Patrick, he's the one that kind of sees it all from his perch on the corner gas station, dealing with all these events that come and go. And you know, he's just haggard, and the store is like closing, and he's worried about his future. And at the same time, people are coming in, and he's just trying to pick the pieces up and move on. And he gets to sell his trains to dipshits, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God. I had to mute myself because I was laughing ridiculously. Let me just full disclaimer here about myself. I've worked a lot of customer service jobs over the years. So I am like fully jaded. Like I am like not very receptive to doing customer service at all anymore. I got to the point where I was basically like, I don't know how anyone can find happiness in customer service. So when I read Bob's story, I was like, this is fucking bullshit. I'd be like, I got to sell trains to dipshits again. That's not like, what the fuck? Like, go get your own modeling clay. I don't fucking have that modeling clay. So yeah, that was kind of my mentality with it. And it was really funny when we had a meeting after my comments, and Bob was like, you know, Patrick, why can't these guys just be happy? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then I was like, what's wrong with me? That's the real question now. Like,
well, and it was funny too, because it happened right after a conversation where we were like, we got to not tell each other what our characters would do.
Exactly. And yeah, it was just, I don't have any tolerance for it anymore. And so when I saw those guys in the store, like having a good time, I was like, nope, no fucking way is that real. Like these guys would be like, did you hear, you know, Mrs. Galloway came in looking for modeling clay for her grandson. I didn't have yellow. And she tore me a new asshole, fucking Mrs. Galloway. Stuff like that. I don't know. Like it was just funny. And it was totally my personality coming through in the edits about it.
Yeah, it's funny because that's just it. You know, it comes down to our perspective. And I was actually kind of hoping we would have at least just a really quick conversation about what that is. And it's really funny because, you know, you pointed it out and have pointed it out at least there, if not one other place that I'm thinking of. And it was like kind of a shock to me as well, where I was like, oh man, like what am I missing here? Like, am I making this completely unrealistic? And I've thought about it more, and I've realized that again, it does just speak to ourselves and our own perspectives. I've had a lot of people in my life who have, you know, you end up sitting down and you have like a real serious like conversation about something. And I've had multiple people tell me they've never met somebody more positive than me in their life, where they're like, man, you know, for example, I was curling one day and I started to get a little bit negative. And the skip, who is essentially like kind of the team coach, he took me aside after the game and he was like, dude, I've never seen you be negative like that in a game before. And the team fell apart. Like, we need you to be the positive guy because that's just all we know you to be. And we can't have that. And I was like, well, that might be where that comes from, where I like have these guys who are like, hey, have a nice day. Hey, thanks. Sorry. You know, like that's just where my brain goes, because it's who I am in a lot of those situations. And I don't have the like jaded, I got to sell trains to dipshits again. Like that wouldn't occur to me in my own mind. And so I miss it. So it is helpful to be reminded of that so that I can portray it more, you know, if it needs to come out.
Yeah. Like that's funny. Yeah. It's just one of those, like we talk about edits a lot, and God, we could have a behind the scenes on just doing editing and working together, because that's just so dense. We talk about a lot of things in edits where it's like, we shouldn't like edit what our characters are going to do. We shouldn't do stuff like that, but we all still kind of do it. We just find different ways of communicating it. Does that make sense?
Yep. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We all still share our opinions. We just get better at sharing them, if that makes sense.
Well, and we've been able to each of us fit almost any criticism under the guise of show don't tell. That's a really awesome one that you can use because you can be constructive with it. You can be like, what if you describe it this way, and suddenly you're steering something in a more the direction you think would make more sense. Or
right. And in this medium, we when we describe things, we have to describe things sometimes to a T, because the audience can't visually see it anyway. They have to listen to. They have to rely completely on our words. Mm-hmm. So that show not tell critique comes up often, because we're like, well, the audience has got to know, why, if we say something like that old lady's face looked grumpy, like, how does it look grumpy? Like, is her face, does she have a frown, or eyes like squinting? What's going on?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where some edits have happened, but overall, yeah, the temperament issue with me and customer service, that was just so me. Oh my God, this is hilarious.
The describing things like you just mentioned, Patrick, it's one that I'm like guilty of by far the most, I think, and it's there's a couple points that you guys both just brought up there. And I think choosing what we describe more in depth, or at least from my perspective, it's another kind of tightrope to walk, just like the magical realism thing I was talking about a minute ago. Because yes, there are things that we want to describe better and more fully through our narrative, but there's also things that we can like just recognize we can allow the listeners to use their imaginations for this. And that's this thing that I've always thought of myself when it comes to storytelling, through a lot of the things I've done on the short story hour and stuff like that, is I enjoy oral storytelling because and also just reading in general, as opposed to films, because it allows you to create your own image. And so there are points where it's more important and other points where it's less important. But there are many times where I will describe two characters giving each other a look, and that look, I'll just say that it portrays X emotion and leave it at that. And you guys are like, come on, man, you can do better than that. Like, what are they seeing? What are they seeing in each other's faces that showed the fear, or that showed the trepidation, or whatever? And it's like, yeah, I'm really.
I think we all kind of anticipate each other's critiques at this point. We kind of have little miniature versions of all of each other on our shoulders as we're writing something. Because left to my own devices, I would have lots and lots of things happen and nothing would be described. And Bob would be kind of the other way around. Like, things would be described in immaculate, spectacular detail, but nothing might happen for 10 minutes. But we can all kind of hear each other chiming in, and like, okay, you got to strike the balance and make the story interesting and suit its purpose.
Oh God, what was the one that I learned that lesson on the most this season? Shadow play. You guys remember how I had that fucking story? Yeah. Like, I was like describing every limb movement of every person in the whole damned thing. Like, and then he moved his left arm toward the door handle and pushed the door open. And then he took a step to the side with his right foot, and then his left foot followed. Like, my God.
There was a lot.
It was, I cut out so much to pare it down to that. But I don't know why I got so lost in the weeds on that story about how I described them moving around in that space. It was just I got so hung up on it. It was really challenging.
We did a much better version of that story. We traded. Kind of late in the game. We traded that one for, was it the siblings' dream story? The siblings were going to be gearing up, getting ready to go.
So. Zipper.
But we swapped because I was just having an awful time with that story too. As I couldn't figure out. Well, now we got to introduce these shadow beings for the nth time, and we kind of had the space figured out, but I was having trouble with it too, and I was trying gimmicky things that weren't working at all. And anyway, you did end up with a great story, but there were growing pains.
It was a lot. That was the most editing, I think. Yeah, that was huge. I really failed on the first take of that. I will say though, I made a great choice, because I did not want to write that brother and sister story at all. Gosh darn it, I was just thinking of something else. My brain is going to like a few different things here. I'll come back to that as the next point, but the point that I want to stick on right now is you left it as a surprise for me, and I really want to hear from Dave about this. But that was one of the other points in this season that there was a lot of work done on your guys' end. The developing the kind of maniacal laughter and the growing intensity of that was fantastic. That really made that story come to life. That was a terrifying story, mostly thanks to the music.
That was the one where we were looking for the laughter, was it not? Where we were kind of taking one thing and using some digital signal processing to kind of turn that laughter into something a little different, was it not?
Yep, I came to you and said we needed absolutely maniacal laughter and just a lot of variations of it, and boy, you delivered.
Well, I think that's another one of those things where it kind of is more impressionistic than realistic, and I think that's especially great for radio. Yeah, it isn't a person laughing. It isn't any kind of earthly creature laughing, but what you created was the impression of a laugh and the tone of just this kind of terrifying, echoing, nightmarish giggle. Well, one of the things that's really neat now that 2 seasons are done is that while we've been able to avoid a lot of like literal sounds, so we've created this atmosphere that we can really do sonorously, musically, anything we want, really, because we haven't rooted ourselves in anything that's realistic.
True. Yeah. Well, and there's no better way to sell an otherworldly supernatural thing than to have it not sound like anything that a person could just go out with a microphone and record. We get to be more musical about it. More. What was your word you invented on the spot? It was beautiful.
Sonorously, sonorifically.
Oh, I like that even better. The other story that really hung me up, if we're moving forward from there, was Descent. I don't think I had a way to describe how much I struggled with it until after I wrote it, and Patrick's notes on the end of it were just like, holy shit. There was a lot in this that had to be there. And man, that is like one of the main reasons why that story in particular, like I sat on it for probably a month. I mean, at least. And it was one of the things that ended up pushing us out another week after, wasn't it Thanksgiving or something? We did a skipped week and then had another skipped week in December or something like that. But it was just so dense.
There was some recording trouble. We just didn't have certain things recorded. But yeah, we also were catching up writing still.
Yeah, not nearly as much as season 1, but that one, man, gosh, I didn't realize it until the end. And like I say, when Patrick said something about it, but it was like, I was so hamstrung on the idea that, because it came up in both Shadow Play, the one we were just talking about, and then The Way Out story way back at the beginning in the first episode, where I was like describing movements too much. And so by the time I got to Descent, I was so worried about doing that again. And I knew that I had a big story to tell with that. Essentially, if you look at the climax of this season, it's a 3-parter. And we each got our own part of it. So like this whole tale of 3s, that's like our foundation. It's War, Descent, and To the Hunting Ground, I think, right? That's kind of that trifecta.
Yeah.
Things are going on kind of all at the same, very similar time, or at least the same day. When I got through it, I was like,
I'm wrong, but those are within an episode of each other, all of them.
Yeah. It was this thing where, again, like I was worried about over describing, and in doing that, I had to tell all these different points to make it make sense. And just like, I felt like I was skipping over them, like just a flat stone thrown across a pond, like little skips at each point, getting through the elemental, getting to the park, getting through the elementals, getting down and experiencing what they experienced at the bottom of the pit. And just like, I'm not describing nearly as much as I want to for any one of these things. And yeah, I don't know. It just, for some reason, it really hamstrung me.
I had something to say to that. I think, Bob, both you and I feel a little bit like interlopers in Patrick's world. Like it's a world that we have all created, including Dave here. Like we are architects of this world here. It doesn't quite feel like it's we want to make sure that Patrick would approve, and like these events are true to his story kind of thing.
Right.
Right. And I alluded to earlier that I felt like I was stealing these big moments with during Lore with the agency, and in season 1 with Exchange. But there is something to that when you get one of these big stories on your plate. There's a certain amount of intimidation that comes with it, even if it's our playground. We feel like we got to carry all three of us worth in this one story, and some of them the stories just are that big, and they feel like that.
Yeah, you've got to do it justice, and it feels like a tall order. Like you don't want to fail on it. You don't want to let the audience down. You don't want to let yourself down or the team down. And
right.
Yeah, we had the 2 new themes in that with the wind and the lightning. That's where those came into play.
Yeah, I think the wind is still something I manufactured out of other things. Like we had the traveling across the plains theme and some other ambient stuff that I think I kind of repurposed as the wind elemental. I don't think I asked Dave specifically for a wind one.
Yeah, I've done a terrible job of cataloging all of this, so I know what it is, but I think that would it's getting to be extensive. What is this? This is 20 episodes now, isn't it?
Yep. Well, at least we've got the little bonus shorts in there and the Halloween one. I think released on the syndication is like 27 or something like that. A couple of those are behind the scenes type things. So I think it's 24 technically, 24, 25.
But yeah, 60 mainline stories and a few odd. Actually, one of the small shorts we got to use what was the title, Bob, of your getting the Chinese food over and over again?
Oh, the takeout story?
Yeah, takeout. And I used the same theme we used for the chair.
That's right.
Basically, this music of repetition, this music of routine, again and again, kind of thing. And it's a completely different version of the same piece. It's Dave, you gave me a couple of different versions of that song over the years. It's a completely different performance, but it suits it fills the same task of here it goes over and over.
Saving us time.
Yeah, I completely forgot that was what we used for that one. That was another one of my favorite stories, right up there with did I call it the death of the party or the life of the party? I can't remember. The Lich story, but either way, the Halloween one. But yeah, that takeout one, that was so fun. I also, one of the things that comes to mind in that, if I think back, was first of all, like those 2 agents in that car, they were so just antagonistic to each other. Like I laughed so much. Like the one, it was kind of like a revisit of Mattson and Wilker if they had some animosity between them. Like it's like the
ones who are absolutely sick to death of each other by the time this conversation happens.
Right. Like the one guy, he's just the older, like getting ready to retire dude, just no nonsense, laconic, doesn't want to even talk to, just sitting there. But the part that I was going to mention, like one of my favorite things that I remember creating was the sequence where they pull up to the gas station and the kid is going to go and order the food, and the driver of the car, the older guy, is sitting there just having a staring contest with Mr. Schaefer inside the gas station. They're just staring daggers at each other for no reason. And I think it's hilarious. I don't know why. It's just, oh man, that was funny. That was like where some of my over describing things started, because I think I even described like sweat running down somebody's forehead in there and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm back, fellas. I
hey.
wanted to jump on that comment just now about the sweat.
Yeah.
Because I remember us texting Bob or something, and I remember you being like, I just don't know what to do. I don't describe enough, or I'm going like right down to the sweat bead on a guy's forehead, like describing like the inaccuracies in his face. And I was like, yeah, that's writing for you. Enjoy. Or whatever I think my advice was. Welcome to writing.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And going back to your struggles with your last stories, those were just like huge stories, you know? Like War and Descent were like massive stories, and War was set up a lot easier than Descent. Descent, we hadn't even ironed out all the details in the pit yet.
That's true, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we were just like throwing you literally into the pit itself to like figure it out. When you were struggling with that, like I remember writing to you and being like, no wonder, like this is a ton of crap that's happening. Oh my God.
It was really paralyzing. It really was. Yeah. I felt like I had to get it right. I mean, it seemed like such a big moment, right? I mean, they're coming back again. Like, think about how much has happened in that pit. It's actually quite a bit. You know, we had them go down the first time with that big climactic sequence where the dad died. And then again, you know, we had a whole story where they were coming out of the pit, and then now like they're going to do it right this time. Like, it couldn't just be this quick little, they get down there and it's all done. Like, no, it had to be a big thing. And yeah, it was just made me nervous that I was going to fail, I guess.
Yeah. That's totally real. Like how you should feel. Like it would
use the pain, use the fear.
Yeah, no, I mean it. I think we all would have felt the same way. It was just one of those giant stories that kind of snuck into the writing, the outline and stuff where we're like, okay, you got to do Descent, and you're like, okay. Oh, you start thinking about everything that happens, and you're like, oh shit, this is a giant story.
Yeah, for sure. I have something on here about, well, I guess before we do that, is there anything else you guys want to say about the between season stories since we went back to Takeout? Like, we never got a chance to talk about those, or do we just move on?
I totally cheated. I just repurposed The Smell, a short film I made a couple years ago, for our in between season stuff. So I got nothing to add.
I thought you did 2 stories though. Oh, the other one was that like kind of poem thing that you wrote. Splat.
Oh, that really early thing. We had no idea what the structure of the show was going to be. That's right, Splat. I forgot all about it. They're super short one. And again, I found some Dave music and chopped it up in between each like line, basically to make it last, more than a minute. Yeah, that's all there was to that story.
That was really fun writing those. Like I did a Street Sweeper one, and that one was, that was just fun because I got to have the surveyor in there just for like a second reappear and kind of just go and then vanish into the back of the forest.
Yeah, I enjoyed that story a lot, and that's what I was just thinking too. Is like that was kind of the first time that there was that theme going in the other direction where you got to take one of our bigger characters, like one of Owen's big characters, and portray that person yourself, because it's usually like us stealing off of yours a little bit. So that was cool. That's right. Boy, we've brought up the surveyor a couple times. Sorry, listeners, the surveyor didn't come back in season 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same with I guess there were a couple of tiny nods to the White-Eyed Cat. Probably not enough cat in this season.
Well, the cat kind of served its purpose,
I guess.
I don't know.
We did, yeah. We got to find out exactly what its deal was, so that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it mainly served as a mysterious presence in season 1. Mm-hmm. So now that the mystery is gone, maybe there's no point.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. The pin flags are still there too.
True. Yeah, there's the surveyor is gone but not forgotten kind of thing.
I don't know where to go with this because I don't know the nature of it, but the next point was just Patrick rant 1 month prior to season 2 start. I can't believe we're going to catch up to ourselves again.
I vaguely remember that happening, but I don't. That's all I remember of it.
Time is coming for me, man.
Time is coming. It sounds like something I would have said. That's for sure. Because I remember I was like, we're not gonna, catch up. We'll have everything written right before, like way before, like we recorded, or like, because the first season we notoriously we were like producing, doing everything like 2 days before the episode was released, like the last 4 or 5 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was, we were like flying by the seat of our pants, and then going into season 2, we were like, nah, we're going to get it this time. Or I was like that, I think. And all of a sudden we caught up and we're like, Jesus Christ, time, it's coming for me. Like,
yeah, it happened again, even though we started easily 2 or 3 episodes further into the season than we were the first time. But I think that was kind of part of it. Like, we had so much of it done, episodes at least like 1 through 5 were almost completely done. And we're talking recorded and everything prior to season 2 being released. But it was so much of another lesson that we learned was like switching gears. Once we had that recorded and we had kind of set those aside and forgotten about some of those narratives, it was hard to get back into like the writing spirit for me after that. At least I'll speak for myself. But like, yeah, you had to switch gears back to like the beginning again. Like, oh, where did we leave this thread off? How do I pick this up? Like that. And that's why
I found that really hard.
Me too.
Switching back into writing, which is odd because we juggled it basically the whole time in season 1, but
it was week to week.
The routine we got ourselves into here. We'd like write it first, record it, then edit, and we're done. But then it stopped being pipelined, and we had to. And those were the more difficult stories too. That's when you ran into dissent, and I had to deal with war and stuff like that. So
I guess I'll try to kind of put something else into that looking forward. But yeah, first of all, season 1, it was even though we caught up to ourselves, it was like a streamlined process, right? We were used to, okay, this week I got to write this story, and then I'll record it and get it to Owen, and we'll put it out next week, and we were just in that movement back and forth. So it was easier. We're talking like we wrote and produced the whole first half of the season, and now it's like, okay, start up second half now is like totally jarring mentally. And yeah, that's where some of my paralysis came from. And so listeners, like, I'll speak to you directly. That is where we have decided to, I'm not going to give you guys any dates or anything like that, but we have decided to take a longer break. We're not going to start releasing season 3 until we're done writing it, just because, honestly, we don't want to take away anything from what we end up giving you guys in terms of, number 1, having to put episodes out late because we're catching up to ourselves, or by like rushing the writing. So we'll definitely be giving you some bonus content as it goes. And if it drags out longer, like there'll be more of that, obviously, at least where we're at now. Like we'll have some bonus episodes. We've got these behind the scenes. And if you guys have any questions for us or anything, we'll do another Q&A episode, which was fun. But it will be a little bit longer this time between seasons, just for that reason.
I was okay doing the writing thing, but like it was difficult to switch gears. So like at the drop of a hat or whatever, it was intense. And I definitely liked the idea of us completing the entire season writing wise before production or whatever you want to call it.
Oh, and what story was I making you yawn in?
Oh no, you're going to do this. Damn it. Damn it, Bob.
All you have to do is just like say the word.
I'm not sure where it came from, but it came out to these guys that I am super suggestible. If there's a mention of yawning, or if somebody does it, I yawn. It's like when somebody mentions lice in your head itches or something. That's my my kryptonite. I will yawn if I witness or think about yawning.
That's what it was. It was the keep off the grass where he's staying up late and on the phone. And there was like multiple yawns that came up. I was like, this is perfect. I was really excited to hear about when you actually had to go through and edit and listen to it. And I'm doing the actual yawns. Like,
yes. Yeah, I think I was cursing you out on chat. Damn it, Bob.
Oh yeah, Patrick loves making me uncomfortable with bullying words, like in Mantervilla.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. I just wanted to at least take a second on here to describe like how, because number one, I hear about it from my mom. She gets mad at, oh, the language you guys use in that show is just so rude. I don't like hearing you talk like that, Bobby. It's like,
that's really funny. Now I'm going to write some horrifying. Yeah, like why stop now? Yeah, it is just stuff that I'm writing to realism, and God, the late '90s, especially in middle school and high school, the homophobia was insane.
Yeah, it was.
And
the era of homophobic slurs, and
it was just horrifying. I mean, like, it's always been a problem, but I just remember it so pointedly back then.
In our day-to-day vernacular, like kids would describe something as, oh, that's so gay, or also like retarded,
Yeah.
Oh, they made you stay home from school. That's retarded. People would just casually throw that stuff around. I remember that as kids. But it makes me uncomfortable now as an adult to like say it for the show. It feels so wrong.
Right. No, I totally get that. Yeah. It's so useful, and especially with the bullying and stuff, it's so useful in the realism, have the actual slang in there.
I just want people to know that I don't enjoy it. That's the main thing, because I'm the one that has to say it. I mean, I know you wrote it, but I have to like, oh gosh, I'll throw fucks and shits around all over the place, but like, some of that other stuff, I don't even want to say it. It's just like,
it's seriously, but I totally get it.
But yeah, it makes it feels real. I mean, because I remember being in elementary school every day hearing people say those words. So,
yep.
Yeah. For better and worse, we haven't dealt with overt racism, but I'm sure that stuff was thrown around way more than I picked up on as a child.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it was. I don't remember a lot of instances of that specifically, like especially in terms of like racial words. But
probably less. It was probably a lot more subtle, but still just as we'd feel horrific about it.
Yep.
Yeah, truly.
And then speaking of disclaimering stuff, like we had a quick discussion before we released War where I was like, oh man, I know some military veterans that listen to this show, and this is the first story we've had where we have like a literal explosion sound in it. Do we need to do some kind of a disclaimer for this? And tossed it around and finally decided not to, just because of what the show is and horror suspense. And we've had some jump scares with sounds and things like that before. So if that is something that bothered you or something like that, let us know.
Hopefully we're not being horribly insensitive, but that was our reasoning, is that we do want to still be able to do the jump scares and the big sound effects and things like that. Although we have, we took out the ambulance siren in season 1 because, if you play that sound and somebody's listening in their car, that's dangerous. That's not okay.
Yeah, that's like an FCC thing, actually. I'm pretty sure we're literally not supposed to do that. Yeah, so
hopefully it wasn't a safety issue for anybody to hear explosions in a description of explosion. Yeah. So our apologies if we made the wrong choice there, but
we're not trying to be insensitive to that stuff. It really is just our genre is horror. We have all sorts, beyond just sound effects. We have like child abuse and suicide, and we have all sorts of very dark topics that there could be disclaimers for in every episode.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And unfortunately, that's just part of the horror genre, like this part of the fiction we're creating. So we're certainly not trying to trigger anyone or anything like that. We're exploring these topics in the hopes that they'll become a little bit more palatable, a little bit more understanding, and the audience can hopefully relate to these characters a little bit more with them. But yeah, we're certainly not trying to trigger anyone or make anyone feel uncomfortable as a purpose. It's more of a byproduct of talking about these difficult situations.
Yeah, kind of trying to bring them to light. I mean, that's just it. And we've talked before about how we are trying to be therapeutic about that in our approach to it and use it for good. Yeah, there is that. I think back to like Stephen King and the terrible, horrible things that he writes about in his stories for the same effect. And I've never seen a disclaimer on any of his books. And we haven't even touched some of the horrific nature of things that he's portrayed. So, not that that's like how I don't like to say that, oh, let's use this other person as a bar. I'm just saying, like, in general, in the genre, that's one example of many where that's what it is. But I just do want people to know also, again, that it is something that we thought about. And if there is if there's any concerns about it, or if you want to have any kind of a conversation about other ways that could look, or ways that we could be better about it to help people out or something, at least just let us know, because I'm sure there's things that we haven't thought of. But if it doesn't bother you, then we'll just keep doing what we do. If we don't hear from anybody, we're not going to change anything, probably. So we've got a few things in the works. You guys saw from the little contest that we did in November that the folks over at Breachers Inc. are more than happy to make some really cool wooden mugs with the Hidden Oaks logo burned on there. And we've got their information up on the website if you want to go over there. Anybody at any time can order one of those custom mugs from James over at Breachers Inc. And, congratulations to the folks that won a few of those mugs. And then the other couple things in that same vein are that we are in the process of, and I know we've mentioned this for a long time, we had a falling out with the company that we were doing merchandise with over the summer. So that didn't end up happening. I know we did mention that, but we have started our own production line of some shirts and things like that. And I've got my own shirt now. I've got some stuff out there. So I've seen them in the flesh, and we will, between season 2 and 3, get a store up and online at hiddenoakspodcast.com, so that you guys, if you're interested, can start purchasing some cool Hidden Oaks gear. If you want, there's going to be like hats, t-shirts, hooded sweatshirts, and sweatpants, kind of regular stuff. And then the other thing is, anybody that's interested, one of the other projects that we're talking about, and I'm really excited for, is that we're planning on putting these stories together in an actual written form collection. And that's, very, very, very much in the idea process at this point. So no promises and no release dates or anything like that, but just so that it is something we're thinking of doing. If at the end of this whole thing you want to go back and actually read some of these stories, we're planning on putting compilations together, one for each season. Patrick's done a lot of the groundwork on that, which is awesome.
Yeah, and there'll be more information coming out about that as the gears get turning. I'm trying to think if I've got anything.
It's been kind of trippy to see this. The Hidden Oaks logo was basically a placeholder. I kind of threw this thing together. I thought, okay, I'll get an oak leaf and some scribbled letters and have it kind of be a visual pun of it's kind of hidden within the thing. And I figured, okay, this will tide us over until we can find a proper artist to do an actual logo. And now it's what we've got, and it's what we've stuck with, and it's on mugs and shirts and things, and it's really cool and trippy to see that.
Yeah, it's literally the first iteration of a logo that you brought to the table, and it was just an instant success in my mind. And it was the funny thing is that the printouts that you brought to, I think it was our second meeting ever, where you brought them in there. It was literally an iPhone photograph of that piece of paper being held up by someone's hand that became the icon image for the podcast apps. Like, you can see the shadow of a thumb if you look at it
That's
closely.
Right. I hadn't even got you the actual file yet.
Yeah. Yep. And that's what we use. It's still that way to this day on like iTunes and iHeartRadio and stuff like that. That is like the official thing, is a photograph of the original concept paper of the thing.
That's funny. Well, that's too good. We can't change it now.
No, not at all. That's what it's going to be forever. Oh man.
Forever. Yeah.
Well, Dave had to run. He just shot me a text, but says to say ciao for him. So ciao from Dave. I'm glad he got to join us and throw in his perspective on everything he shared his perspective on. We heard more than just about the process of music. He does bring a lot to the table.
He really does. Yeah, I feel bad
Really.
that we didn't have as much for him as I would have liked. But I'm really glad he was here. Robin was actually going to be here today, but she woke up feeling sick this morning and wasn't able to make it. But she, says hi to everybody as well. We had most of the team.
Good.
But anyway, yeah, so a lot more to come. I guess I will put one more thing out there, like another little action item, especially with the between the seasons bonus episodes. We have a little bit of a plan for them, but we might, because we have more time, might have more room for some other ideas in there. And, again, like if you guys listen and you know the universe and you like the show, like holler at us and let us know if there's any little yarns that have been dropped along the way that you would like us to pick up and just explore, doing a little one-off story about something that might have happened or maybe that didn't get talked about at all. That would be something.
Or yarns that you would like to pick up and run with. Guest stories are always welcome between or during seasons.
Absolutely. Yeah, any of the above. Just let us know. We love hearing from you guys. And same thing about, going into season 3. And if you have any questions, shoot them out to us on Facebook at Hidden Oaks Podcast at gmail.com, or let's see, Twitter at Hidden Oaks Pod, and Instagram at Hidden Oaks Podcast. And we always love the idea of seeing fan art. If you want to try and draw what she looks like, or draw the storm or the Emerald Hawk Moth, I think would be a really cool image to see what you guys think that might look like. Just some of that different stuff. It could be really fun. Would love to see some participation from you guys of any of that. I know you're a bunch of creative individuals because that's the kind of people that listen to shows like this. If anything we get like that, we would love to share with everybody else. I'm sure it would be just a super cool thing to see. So yeah, any questions, anything you'd like us to explore, any art or anything else that you've got to share with us, shoot it our way. We'd love to shower you with wonderful, positive praise and love. So that's pretty much all I can think of. So unless you guys have anything else, I think we'll say goodbye and we'll see you guys at the next thing that happens, which I would give us at least a few weeks before you hear from us again.
I think you said it all. That wraps us up.
Yeah.
Thank
Keep
you
listening. And thank you for listening, everyone. And keep listening, because we're only I'd say if the monster were percentage, we're about 25% of the way through the monsters. So there's still a whole lot left going on with the monster that you don't know about. So stay tuned.
Yeah, season 3 is going to be fantastic. I'm excited. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks you guys for being here with me. And we will see you soon. Until next time, listeners. And as promised, here's a little blooper reel for you.
What are you doing?
You should know not to mess with us. We've got a big, heavy backpack thing, and we know how to use it. I mean, we don't, but there's a lot of weird crap in it.
Can you try doing it again, but not so whiny?
What do you mean? How's
You
that whiny?
like you got nasally and high pitched, and
That's
that was
because it's me yelling.
Weird.
You should know not to mess with us. What?
You should know not to mess with us. That's what you sound like.
You should know not to mess with us. He could ignore. It's okay.
Am I distracting you?
They like to put S words back to back for me. I don't know why, but I hate it.
I'm not good with the back-to-back S words either.
They're hard. And I'll have sentences frequently where there's 3 or 4 of them in a row. And I'm like, you motherfuckers, this is hard.
Ellie slowly began. That worked out real well.
It's okay. You're doing great.
The woman speaking to her sounded maddening.
Maddeningly.
Maddening.
It's a tricky word. There's a lot of shit going on in that word.
There's like 3 words that I do this with.
That's okay. That's okay.
This is now the 3rd one.
My ribs are cramping.
Maddeningly.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Maddeningly. Okay.
Just say it once where it doesn't sound like you're reading it, though, or sounding it out. Because that won't work.
Maddeningly.
It would be fun. Yes, he's perfect. It would be really funny though if it was like real smooth narration, like this. This is going in the blooper reel. By the way,
Don't do that.
Yeah,
Oh my
totally.
God, I'd hate myself.
No. My
Oh.
part, like this. I mean, maybe I'll have you say maddeningly once. There will be others. Ellie heard a voice before she caught a glimpse of a figure. Other songs, some good, some bad. The woman speaking to her sounded maddeningly familiar. But try as she might, Ellie could not. Wouldn't that be funny? We just
Maddeningly.
like you can hear that you're like pointing at it, like reading.
Dun, dun, dun.
There's a dash between syllables.
Maddeningly. Oh God. Maddeningly. The woman speaking to her sounded maddeningly. I'm going to do the woman speaking to her sounded and then say maddeningly.
Yeah, but don't say
I
that.
am working on it.
Okay.
This is like.
Yeah, you can take a break. If
Maddeningly. Okay.
you can go just like this. Watch. The woman speaking to her sounded maddeningly familiar. You can do that. I can make that go away.
Okay.
Yeah. You got this.
The woman speaking to her sounded maddeningly familiar. She was so close to pinning down the melody and identifying the voice. She needed just one more movement. She nearly had it. But what?
Moment.
What did I say?
Movement.
Shit.
By the third fold, the deafening sound had taken a back seat to both the searing pain and the snake-fuckingly crazy essence of what was happening. Is that what it says?
Yep.
I don't know if that's a new one for me. Snake-fuckingly. I don't think I've ever said those words out loud before.
Titty sprinkles.
I'm Morgan Freeman. Titty sprinkles.
Titty sprinkles.
There is a line coming up that we say together, I think, at least one.
Is it titty sprinkles?
Yes. Andy Dufresne. No. He loves seeing titty sprinkles.
She kicked off her socks, which was normal, but she also fussed her way out of her pajama bottoms, her nightshirt, and her panties. That's dirty.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, see that.
Inappropriate,
Containment is failing.
she said.
Oh, damn it. I saw Eddie. Mira and her 2 rookie agents circled the park without words. I don't have to pop up there.
Oh. But it's mine, not yours, so.
Minutes later, J&J had bodged? Minutes later, J&J had bodged together the means to hide both a gruesome scene of their newly killed co-workers and a graveyard full of long dead people who didn't stay put. But if it's gone, it seems like it is. How come it's still working?
Commander, are you all right? Gosh, this bitch is crazy prepper. Based off me? Yeah, it makes sense.
She saw exactly what she hoped to when she turned. What? Yeah.
Oh shit! I hit something. Ow! The elbow. Fuck! That was real. Jesus fucking Christ! I hit a mirror, but it didn't break.
You don't have to like actually fight. Just do some sounds like you're objecting. Like do more vocal stuff. You don't have to flat thrash around.
All right. Get the fuck away from me. Fuck off. Jesus fucking Christ. Get the fuck away.
Tell them no a few times. No.
No, get back. Get the fuck away.
Well, I must say, an unprecedented development in New Brighton. Brought to you here live by fucking A. God damn it. Oh, man, I didn't look through that log close enough. Fuck. I didn't come up with anything other than the WRAM. Was it RAM radio? I just looked at it. Owen, you don't need to look down anymore. So scroll up to the top. Tell me what it says.
WRAM, the RAM.
Yep, WRAM, the RAM.
That's what it says.
Do I want to call it like RAM Radio, or just should I say the RAM, or brought to you live by the RAM?
I think the RAM, because that's what you said at the beginning.
All right.
Yeah, the RAM. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a really poor job on my part. Okay, here we go. Back into it. Well, I must say, an unprecedented development in New Brighton, brought to you here live by the RAM. We should perhaps, and if you can think of some other line, if there might be some other line before I just jump into, and that's the end. But anyway, and that's
go ahead. Do we want to try and get like any pounding on the door kind of thing, or?
Sure.
Yeah, do a little bit of that. No, that sounds terrible.
Oh, okay.
Owen.
Yeah, let me try.
Or you gonna give it a shot? Okay. That's good.
That's way too polite, though.
Yeah, do it. You know
Let me try again.
You know what a cop knock is, right? Like 5 bangs, bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. How's that?
Do it again. That was perfect, like rhythm. Do it louder. Slow it down a little bit in between each bang. One more time, then we're good.
Gavin, I'm trying to make sound effects. Leave me alone. Try to make sound effects.
Okay, well, you're pounding and nobody in the house knows what's going on.
Sorry. Hang on. I need a second. Okay.
That was good. That was perfect. Thank you. Okay.
I actually, here, I want to try a couple of two. I went out to my shed.
That was the weirdest, like,
I have a shitty door.
Your phone captured that really poorly, man. It sounds all digital.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yep.
Forget it. We got good ones from Patrick. Cool.
Reports on the unusually high number of children's and adults' teeth gone missing recently. From Regional Public Radio, God damn it!
Say the RAM. From the RAM, I'm Stephen Goodall.
Yep. From the RAM, I'm Stephen Goodall. Well, I must say, an unprecedented development in New Brighton, brought to you here live by fucking the RAM. God, that throws me off. How much do I rely on the script? Brought to you here by WRAM Radio, I think is what I'm just going to go with here. RAM Radio. That's what I'm going to go with.